Okay, am I recording? I think I am recording. Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good part of day, depending where you are. Thank you all for joining. This is a very informal and short notice session, so to speak. It wasn't planned far in advance. Something that drove me to put this together and make it available. The purpose of today's session is to share some thoughts, some insights around the concept of system modeling, system thinking, and system modeling. Now, this is something that, you know, as an organizational design consultant and coach, I rely on a lot. My ability to see the whole, my ability to assess and triage the system, organizational system of a client or an employer company. I have been using system thinking as one of the, so system thinking for me is one of the key dimensions in my personal mentoring and coaching of individuals and people that are aspirants to maybe perhaps gain some credential as a coach. So this is just FYI, but in general, I think system thinking is a very powerful tool in a toolbox of a coach. Would it be someone who operates at multiple teams level or maybe at higher organizational level? It really doesn't matter. I mean, if we think of the whole system, as if we think of an organizational ecosystem as a whole, then things that we may potentially observe at multi-team level will have a direct mapping to something that happens organizational or ecosystemically, or the word we frequently hear people use, enterprise level, although this word has been pretty widely and pretty broadly misused and abused out there. So oftentimes we need to do a reset on understanding what enterprise is, which could be a separate question altogether. I am sharing my screen, and what you actually see here is, I was actually Googling up myself. So stepping back, so as a coach, so from a coaching perspective, from a coaching stance, we need to meet our clients where they are. We shouldn't be giving too much leading. We shouldn't be asking too many leading questions. We shouldn't be anchoring them to our own views. We should be more of a reflection. We should be more of we should be more enablers of their own abilities, capabilities to reflect upon themselves. In which case, in which instance, the role of a coach is very synonymous with the word of a therapist. In fact, we oftentimes hear this. Well, thank you for the therapy. It's almost at the corporate level. Now, so what I was trying to figure out for myself was this, and I think I knew the answer all along. I just wanted to look for some references, for some evidence. Even in therapy, therapists have some certain moral obligations. So I won't go as far as saying this is the law, but there's some moral obligations to draw an envisionary boundary, like almost like a dotted line, where they should or should not be advising a client, hey, I'm hearing certain things, I'm sensing certain things from you, and let me reflect so you can come to your own conclusions and determinations. But what if is something that I'm hearing or sensing requires attention? I mean, where do I step in actually and do something, maybe to prevent something that may not necessarily be a good thing? So I actually Googled this page, and even for therapists, there are certain things that even if they hear their clients say or hint, a therapist should raise a flag, right? So like if someone creates a threat of themselves or to their surroundings, children, elderly, in general, there could be instances where even a therapist needs to step in. So why am I using this analogy? Well, I'm using this analogy because as coaches, we really need to meet our clients where they are. And for example, when we coach someone how to bike, we probably want them to make as many experiments as possible, maybe to fall, to get bruises and scratches, but to learn by doing. However, there could be certain instances where we do step in and say, well, try all of that, but please do not go in this direction. For example, do not take your bike on a highway because that's pretty dangerous, right? So this is where we need to draw a line as coaches and just like as therapists. This is all about, you know, just this is more of an ethical dilemma, an ethical perspective, of course, for a coach. And in order for us to be more skilled and empowered to do so, we need to be also experts in a specific field we are coaching and working with our coachees. And again, now going back to what I have been saying all along, being able to see the whole picture, being able to see the whole, the system, the ecosystem is a big asset. And therefore, I wanted to have this conversation so people can start maybe using, at least considering to add, considering to adding this coaching tool to their toolbox. So let me switch gears real quick and visualize to you what a system model could look like. And by the way, every time we create a model, it's best if we do it together in a group, or maybe a handful of individuals that have something in common. Maybe the people that work together for the same company, or a handful of coaches that have the similar experience, or maybe just people that have similar general expertise but haven't worked together and just wanting to explore the system. And here we refer to the system as an organizational system, not a digital, not an electronic system. What I've done here, I have used some of the questions from the certified team coach application that the Scrum Alliance has available for those that want to pursue the credential. And I kind of extrapolated from there a few questions, and then I further used them to build a system. I thought it was a good idea because I mentor people for the program, but also there are some good questions in this application that could be unpacked and made into a system model. So here's one. When testing Agile knowledge and when we ask for team challenges experience, this is the question we ask. Identify 2 team level formation development challenges commonly encountered, blah, 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 while introducing Scrum. So I am putting myself now in the shoes of an applicant, someone who is answering the question. And I come up with these 2 potential challenges: lack of product owner and fever with velocity. When I say fever, I mean something that we oftentimes refer as, oh, well, we're so intoxicated with velocity, probably not a good thing to be so feverish about it. So to me, those are 2 challenges, okay? So just hold that thought for a minute. Another question I wanted to leverage for this was Agile Principles. The question is about, discussing some of the experiences you may have when there was no obvious resolution to an impediment, and you leverage the known Agile principles. So lo and behold, I went to the agilemanifest.org. Of course, these 4 postulates are, sound like music to everyone, but there are also 12 principles, right? So I picked a few that were mostly relevant to my thinking, such as building projects around motivated individuals, working software is the primary measure of success, and building people and developers, business people and developers must work together daily throughout a project. And the third question I wanted to add to the system of my thinking was this one: knowledge. Also, again, with Scrum knowledge, Scrum scaling. Describe and experience coordinating the work of multiple Scrum teams. Blah, blah, blah. You can read at your own pace. So, and it's also asking for challenges. What challenges did you encounter? So in my experience, I've seen these 2: complexity of traditional organizational design and local optimization by single function specialists and first line managers. Again, my personal experience. So what I've done in all 3 cases, I've spun off these challenges and I turned them into what's called system variables. I would like to know, and I would like to explore how these system variables are being impacted by other system variables within the system, the ones that sit upstream, and how they subsequently impact potentially some other system variables downstream in the system. So this is my intent. This is my goal. And let me zoom out for just a second to show you what it looks like. This is by the way, this is a mirror board for those of you that may not know. This is the pretty cool facilitation and enablement tool that allows you to draw and do various things. I don't work for the company. I don't care if you use it or not. There are other tools like Moral and other things, other boards. So from the first question up in the top, I spun off these two variables. Likelihood of finding a real product owner. The problem was lack of product owner. And from the fewer with velocity, I created a variable which I want to play with, which is called degree of emphasis put on velocity. And now I'm trying to build a system around this. Oh, and by the way, just to jump ahead of myself, these three principles, I also spun off into three variables. Degree of synergy, obviously. Degree of synergy between business and technology. Degree to which a working product is viewed as the primary measure of success. And degree of individual motivation. So when we talk about system modeling, it doesn't matter as much where you start, especially if you're brainstorming, you can start anywhere. You will eventually build up and expand laterally, medially, upward and downward. You may want to start with a system optimizing goal. Why exactly are you exploring the system? So if you ask me what was my system optimizing goal in this case, my goal was to see if some of these questions that people come across in the application are even relevant to one another. For example, if someone speaks from their own experience or writes from their own experience, is this all interrelated? Can someone just almost like trick the application or trick the discussion and have three completely independent experiences? In my personal view, if you're a human, if you have been doing this for a living, most likely everything is interrelated. So let's take a look. Likelihood of finding a real product owner. It will have a positive, by the way, these arrows mean direct relationship, direct impact. If this variable is high, likelihood of finding a real product owner, it will have a positive impact on likelihood that real product owner will set priorities in the backlog. By the same token, it will have a positive effect on clarity of product definition. It will have a negative effect. It will lower the level of, so it will lower likelihood that this role will be hijacked by analysts, managers, and various proxies. And again, we can go in multiple directions. So let me go in this direction now. Likelihood that real product owner will set priorities on a backlog is going to have a positive effect on likelihood that teams will be able to work according to real business priorities. This is going to have a negative impact on likelihood of seeing excessive volumes of technical stories in the backlog. So of course, we can always classify any one of system variables as a good one or a bad one. Do we want to have more of it or less of it? So clearly, when we see this one, we want to have more of it, right? Because this is what we really want in Scrum and in other light Agile frameworks that expect prioritization based on business needs. Now, this is by itself is not a good thing. Would you not agree? And this not such a good thing has a positive impact on likelihood that this role will be hijacked by analysts and managers and proxies. So goodness stops or decreases badness, but badness here amplifies badness. And why is this the case? You may argue this is always a subject to discussion, right? I've put it together, but this could be always a more conversation. Well, because you have so many technical stories and so many, not customer-centric requirements, then you're going to end up having too many analysts and proxies and technical managers being in charge of prioritizing and refining them. So it's going to be less of customer-centric backlog refinement and more so like a technical backlog that is not according to business priorities. I can take this into a very wide loop and bring it all the way down here, that risk of interference with communication, because when you have too many additional people in the system that really interfere with direct communication, it's going to create hindrance. It's going to have a negative effect on communication between So this variable is what? Likelihood that real users will be talking directly to developers. That's what we want in Scrum, in large-scale Scrum. We don't want any conduits or translation layers. So this will lead to degree of synergy between business and technology. This factor by itself is going to hinder this good transition. Now we can play this out in any way. By the way, I couldn't really map it swiftly. I'll just put it on the side for now. This question has generated to me, for me, the following two variables. Likelihood that organizational design will be descaled. Descaled meaning simplified, reduced in waste and overhead and muda. Now, this by itself is a great thing, right? So you want to have simpler, leaner, more robust organizations. Then if you had this in place, then the likelihood that real users would be talking directly to developers would be, a common sense outcome, because the flatter your organization, the fewer organizational layers you have, there's a higher probability that real users will be talking directly to developers. Now, I put these two variables in red, and I drew these arrows as thick arrows because they, the annotation means they signify strong emphasis, strong impact. Here is an example: organizational readiness to challenge the status quo. This is going to be a good thing, and it's going to have a dramatic positive effect on this, which is also a good thing. Relies on commercially successful framework, or maybe frameworks in plural, is going to have a dramatic opposite effect. So this question was about frameworks, and of course, we're not answering the application question. No, that's not the intent. I extrapolated something from the question that could become now a variable, a system variable that we can explore further, and perhaps it will help me answer the question, this one as well as others. So of course, if you are if an organization has decided to rely on a very heavy, very convoluted framework, chances that it would be willing to descale and simplify its org structure are much lower. So that's why there is a minus here, negative. Let me shift over to this side of the diagram just to show you how other things might be connected. And by the way, we can, of course, discuss any transition and any degree of amplification or reduction. And of course, this is always a subject to discussion. And I'll tell you in a little bit who is best to use it with and when. But here's an example. Building projects around motivated individuals. So I spun off a variable here that's called degree of individual motivation. Now, this is going to have a positive and direct impact on the likelihood that developers are willing to learn and become full stack. You may argue, how is it directly related? Well, there's and you could be probably right. Maybe there are some additional proxy variables that are required in between these two, but to me it's obvious, and this is my diagram, and I can explain why. Well, because if you properly motivate individuals, then they will be exhibiting those behaviors and those actions that you have been properly incentivizing, right? So if you incentivize full stack people, if you incentivize learning, cross-functional learning, T-shaping, cross-pollination with knowledge, you will be seeing this. Behaviors you incentivize are behaviors you seek. Another one here is what? Degree to which a working product is viewed as a primary measure of success. Again, going back to one of the principles of Agile, one of the 4 postulates of Agile Manifesto and one of the 12 principles, working software of comprehensive documentation. Here is an example of I'm just generalizing a product. 9 out of 10 times in our case, it will be probably a software product, but not necessarily. So if we use this as the measure of success, then it will have a negative effect. It will slow down. It will reduce um, reliance, historical reliance on metrics and regs. Why? Well, because if you ship incrementally and consistently, and you are creating a lot of transparency and visibility around what you're building, then naturally, whoever is a consumer of this will say, that's great, that's sufficient. You don't need to give me a weekly status report. That's meaningless. That has no value to me. What really speaks, shipping code, working code and shipped code speaks louder than reports. So if this historical historical reliance on metrics and regs is high, and by itself it's not a good thing, then it will amplify this other variable upstream here. That downstream from that one, but it's up in my diagram. Degree of emphasis put on velocity. Just because if you work in the culture, in the organizational culture that is so much dependent on metrics and regs, inevitably velocity would be one of those, right? For agile teams, that's the first thing that people are going to ask. And this is actually going to be, I want to make an emphasis here. It's going to be a thick line here, very thick line. When you put too much emphasis on velocity, on metrics in general, most likely you're going to end up with system gaming. It could come in many forms. Estimations will be inflated, forecasts will be longer, buffering and padding will be more shameless. There will be other things that will be, there could be other things that would be really not welcome, not desirable. Now, this thing by itself is not a good thing, right? System gaming, it's lying, right? It's lying at the organizational level. And it's going to have a dramatic negative effect on overall general trust among people, right? This by itself is a great thing to have, right? You want the people to be trustworthy and trust each other. Then this is going to have a positive impact on the degree of synergy between business and technology, right? So this is good. This is good. This is being hindered by something that is not so good. Not in so many words, this kind of covers almost all of the variables that I have in the system. And before I take some questions, let me say something else. This is only as good as individuals' ability to have a conversation. So the whole idea of creating a system model is not to have a pretty picture. The whole idea of creating a system model is to model a conversation, explore and expose those system dynamics that may not be obvious to a naked eye. So superficially, you may see just maybe a bit of a rash on your palm, on your hand, and you would try to put a cream on it. You think it's going to go away, but it doesn't. Why? Because maybe you should stop eating oranges. Maybe you have a systemic allergy. So we're really trying to expose the system, to explore what's not obvious. And instead of going after the peripheral manifestation of the problem, look for a systemic root cause. So something like this could potentially help you model a conversation on your team, maybe among Scrum Masters doing some work together as a part of a community work, or maybe Scrum Masters, of course, they are multi-team Scrum Mastering, like for instance, in large-scale Scrum, would be clearly team-level coaches doing the same. You can use the same exact approach talking to senior management because a picture speaks 1,000 words. You can model it first and then bring it to their attention, or you can actually engage them in the conversation with modeling, depending how much freedom they will have and how much time they're going to give you. So all in all, it's just one of the ways, probably one of the most effective ways to see the whole. And again, this is this is not a new discovery to me, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way. Coaches need to be able to see the whole. This is just a way to empower yourself with a pretty effective tool to do so. If you're ever interested to learn about system modeling, to read about it outside of our domain of work, you may want to read the books by Peter Senge, The Fifth Discipline. He talks about beer manufacturing industry and wholesales and distribution. It really explores your mind on from a systems perspective, how things work, right? And of course, yeah, I mean, we use it like very extensively and expansively. We use in large scale Scrum. We teach people to see the whole, to see the system. And that's why system modeling, if you've ever been to, if you ever seen any pictures, illustrations of what less training is, you will see, oh my God, the entire perimeter is all system models. So we make people into system modelers and system thinkers, because once you see something, it's almost impossible to unsee. And of course, as coaches, we want to have this capability, because when we address our clients, our coachees, we want to know, not just, we definitely want to have some great coaching techniques and some, you know, we don't want to lose our coaching stance, but being able to understand the environment that our coachee is coming from, and being able to see the whole, the system, could be a huge asset, because of those reasons that the above mentioned, right? So you need sometimes to ask those powerful questions. You may not necessarily give a direct telling to a client, but based on your understanding of the system, you may ask very powerful and very uncomfortable questions and see where they go with it. And that's why I compared a, you know, coach to a therapist. You know. So I'm going to pause for now. I mean, I kind of rattled off for a little while, and I'll take some questions. So maybe some ideas, or, you know, this is not meant to be, it wasn't meant to be like a one-way presentation. I wanted this to be more of a discussion on any front, in any dimension. Just ask, or just raise your hand and ask.
Yeah, Jenny, how much time it took you to create this model?
Oh, how long? Frankly, I announced the event, and I, you know, sent out invitations before I even started. It took me maybe a couple of hours on and off doing other things, running around with kids. So it wasn't a long time. Maybe if I just gave you net, the net would be maybe an hour and a half. But also, yeah, for me, obviously, it's maybe a little easier because I do it a lot, and sometimes some of these almost modules I repurpose. I don't have them. I don't have to copy paste. It's very easy to use Miro. But in my mind, I know if I'm talking about motivation, there'll be at least a few downstream variables. If I talk about heavy scaling, there will be at least a few downstream variables. So, but then you have to glue together, right? And also a couple things. There is no one best way to do it. What's working for you may not be working for me, and vice versa. It could be different in different environments. Now, I mean, I would probably say if you and I are fundamentally different in perceiving whether it's the same direction or the opposite direction, then you and me probably want to have a talk. But if you say this is just a regular impact, and I say, oh, this is a dramatic impact, Mohammed, then yeah, that's not big of a deal. That's our disagreement is not, we don't really have a disagreement. We have a maybe slightly different perception. So to your question, it doesn't take forever. But if it took you a couple hours, and if you did this together with someone else, it's a very worthy investment, because instead of writing, you know, 5 wiki pages and 10 box notes, you could just engage in a conversation and model it.
Yeah, a side question, sorry, you answered it in detail actually. I did this exercise a couple of weeks ago with one of my friends. We were doing it together, and we were trying a system model. The problem we face is like where to decide to stop, like how much detail we can take it to. Like,
okay, so where to start and how much detail? So remember one thing, it's an ecosystemic model. So technically it can expand as much as this canvas. I mean, my canvas is huge. I mean, I got things there. In general, you can build a system that embraces so many different organizational dynamics inside of your department, outside, team level, system, like enterprise level, you name it. How many details? Well, here's one example. I'm making this transition, the degree of individual motivation going into a likelihood that developers are willing to learn and become full stack. I could be very wrong to this audience to make this as a direct transition. Why? Because for some people, this may not be obvious. So I may need to add maybe a few, extra variables here That would be, we refer to them as proxy variables, right? Why is this really from degree of individual motivation to this? Maybe you need to explain. Something happens in between. That it makes it a little busier, a little more refined, granular, but it helps to model a conversation. And once you see something that's obvious, then you may say, you know what, I don't need to have these extra proxy variables here. I'll just remove it and make it simpler. You can also see, like, here's an example of a positive feedback loop, right? Something I wanted to mention. Likelihood of finding a real product owner, clarity of product definition. In fact, this is one of the standalone system model and exercises in less training when I give it. Why? Because if you start off with a clear definition of a product, it will be much easier for you to identify a real product owner. Because if you do some component-centric development and develop very technical components, finding a business person who will be setting priorities is almost impossible, because they will be not interested in this. But the flip side is true too. Now, once you found that person, he or she will be providing guardrails, and she will be guarding the product definition. And their tolerance to this hijacking by analysts and management and proxies would be, he or she will not be as tolerant. So this is a positive feedback. You create good product definition, it will be easier for you to find a product owner. Once a product owner is in place, they will be the first person to guard and protect your product definition, because now they have stake in the ground. They have skins in the game. So,
would you share the link with us?
I'm sorry, Morris, can you repeat the question, please?
Would you share the link you are using with us?
Would I share the link? So this is my private mirror board, and I use it constantly for training. So this is somewhat private. What I can do, I will take a screenshot of this, and I will either share it with everyone who was in attendance, or I'll just post it on my website, and I'll provide a link to that. Would that be okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll definitely share the artifact. I'll probably make it a little more compact and make it more readable, and I'll share.
Gene, can I just ask a technical thing?
Please.
Some of the arrows go straight to boxes, and some of them go to the transitions. So is that saying it affects it's an impact on the strength of that transition?
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. So in fact, annotation itself could vary. Like here I'm saying, I'm using the minus. Usually I use the O to say the opposite. Like, in fact, I'll show you in a second what I mean by it. But you're right. The actual transition is from here to there, but this is an amplifying or reducing factor. In fact, let me show you something that will be even better illustrative of this, because there is a way to actually learn this. So if you go to system thinking on this page, and this one I can share, you can see something like, oh, this is actually a constraint directly into the variable, and there was somewhere a constraint that was not into the variable but into the error. But first thing I was gonna say, Robin, different annotations. O and the minus is the same thing. O stands for the opposite. Minus is the negative, the same thing.
Right.
But here, let me try to interpret this one. Maybe you will understand why sometimes it's not. Well, you can put this constraint on a variable, but let me see, maybe. Oh, this is it. Very good one. Look, pressure to. You have a goal to increase velocity. It's a system optimizing goal, and we can argue this is not a good goal. This is not a good thing to advocate. High velocity will lead to system gaming. So there will be a pressure to try actions for high velocity. Now, as a quick fix to address this problem, because you have low velocity, QF stands for quick fix, we are going to introduce more developers. Number of developers. We want to increase the number of developers because we want more and more velocity, right? We call it a quick fix because It's something that you like, it's a steroid, it's a painkiller. You inject in the system to quickly fix the problem. We're not spending enough time to educate him and to make sure they become cross-functional and do knowledge transfer. We just want to throw more bodies. In fact, Brooks' law speaks about it very loudly. Like, you put more people to the project that's already late, it's going to come in later. But here's, this is an attempt, right? If we hire so we can hire people at common rate and very cheap people, right? I'm going to pause for a second. We can hire experts, and we can hire people that are not experts, but they just sell cheaper. Now, the variable cash supply here is going to have a negative effect, an opposite effect on this. If you have cash supply that is a plenty of, so you got a plenty of money, right? You have a budget to do work, then quick fix of hiring a cheap rate, it's going to be lower, because you will not be tolerating, you will not be allowing yourself, your hiring managers, to go and look for cheap people. You will be amplifying this also quick fix, because maybe you don't need to hire more people, you just need to train your own. But at least this is not a constraint on this quick fix, because you got a plenty of cash. If you want to go, and buy some super smart developers, the best of the best, you can't do that. In general, this may not be the best approach. That's why we call it a QF, quick fix. But at least you are not limiting yourself to cheap people, to cheap resources. Although we don't call people resources, we call them intellectual assets, but that's something else. Both of these, however, will increase the number of developers, and we call this a belief. Sometimes you can annotate the way you like it. There is a false belief that if you just throw more bodies at the system, at the team, velocity is going to go up. Maybe it will, very temporarily, because you just injected the steroid in the system. But what do we know about high velocity? Like when you drive a highway, on a highway, the faster you go, the more bump you get, right? Speed bumps. So your number of bucks is going to go up. And the number of bucks as it goes up, it will have a negative effect on velocity. So it's like a stabilizing loop. And this is the way to explore the system. So what do you do with it? So you may go to the senior manager and say, look, well, first of all, we're throwing more bodies at this. This is a quick fix. This is not a permanent solution. Secondly, you already gave us very scarce budget. So what exactly are we telling us to do? Go buy the worst of the worst? What do you think they're going to do to our system? What do you think they're going to do to our code? They're going to create even more problems. So you're going to have, lower velocity and more bugs. So that's the way to really explore the system. There are so many different ways you can do this. And because it's an ecosystem, you can map it out and, laterally and medially and up and down, and find some relationships that were not apparent from the beginning. Hopefully that answers, Robin.
Yes, great. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. My pleasure.
Hi, Gene. Oh,
yes.
This is Dorothy from Washington, D.C. area, USA. I'm just wondering if you have any advice you can share about when you see a problem in a system and trying to introduce a little bit of a disruption. So one thing that definitely resonates with me very much is where you have analysts hijacking the product owner. And to switch that dynamic, I think requires some type of disruption, but there is definitely a risk of alienating one or both of those players in there.
So the short answer is, I think you're reading the system right. You agree? I agree with you wholeheartedly. There's one variable I just didn't have enough time to plug it in. We refer to it as a system optimization, right? I'm sorry, local optimization by roles, by individuals in those roles. So as system modelers, we need to be able to see and hear local optimization in many dimensions. And this is one of the examples. These analysts, managers, and proxies are very local optimized to do the best they can along the lines of their historical, traditional role definition. Now, how do you address this? And again, I don't want to digress into any specific framework or what's the right word? The school of thought. But in large scale Scrum, for example, when we go through organizational redesign, we very clearly stipulate at the beginning to senior management, and this is something we do as a part of an informed consent. No one's going to have to lose a job. So if you don't make this very clear and obvious, you're going to have a lot of internal resistance and a lot of implicit resistance and sabotaging of the effort. And John Carter probably says it better than I do. You can play the video by John Carter, Resistance to Change. During times of significant changes, people that are locally optimized will do everything they can to disrupt it. And so you either have to remove them or do something that they are not disruptive. So in large-scale Scrum, for example, we clearly delineate between job security and role security. We want to retain our good people and keep them busy with meaningful stuff, but not just busy, because that's just going to be a role security. Like I live in New York City, right? And we have a very famous bridge, Verrazano Bridge. 20 years ago, it was all toot booth. You have to drive through, you have to pay. In every booth, there was a clerk. Today, at one point, it was fewer of those booths and more of a drive-through. But now there's like just drive fast and there was no one there. So I'm sure these people were repurposed to do something else for the city or for the municipality. But the role of a clerk in a booth is gone. Because if it wasn't, we would be optimizing for the role. And we should be optimizing for the system. So it's very important, to your point, Dorothy, at the beginning of any meaningful organizational change, to make it clear that people will be given all opportunities and options to remain employed, meaningfully, gainfully employed. And we should give all the opportunities to people to retrain. Maybe if a different organizational area still requires their old skill and old role, maybe move them out there. Of course, we can always be in a situation where someone is absolutely not willing to learn anything new. They just, focused and locked to the role. And this is a slightly different problem we need to resolve now. But we definitely want to make sure the HR element is very closely addressed. That's why this is actually, if I want to do this right, if I want to serve justice, I would put it in a different color, and I would expand this whole thing into HR related topic, right? So when you remodel the system, we can go as far and as deep as we want. Now, this is something that will build into the model by itself, how to incentivize individuals, how to do, or maybe abolish altogether individual performance appraisals. What do you incentivize? What do you pay for? Do you incentivize individuals or teams? How do you performance appraisals? Do you have a career path for a specific role? A bunch of things. So hopefully that shines a bit of light. So this is clearly a challenge, but we can't just assume that these problems, this inherent resistance is going to go away. We already built this challenge, this complexity in the first place, right? So now we have to pay to resolve it. So it's really organizing. Otherwise it's like an animal. It's like an elephant. It's small. It eats a lot of. It starts eating grass. It gets bigger. It asks for more grass.
Yep. And
it becomes just big and big and big until it stabilizes and becomes. And what do we know about large animals during Ice Age? So you get the hint, right? So.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, there was a very interesting video, Business Agility by, we had a webinar in case if anyone is interested, 6 Enablers of Business Agility. My colleague from the UK, Karim Harbert, talked about the extinction and survival of the fittest in situations, under conditions such as COVID and other adverse conditions. What happens if you're not, what if you're not agile? It's great when you have big, body really, your weight really counts when everything is stable, right? The bigger you are, the easier for you to have a lot of momentum. But what happens if you have some unpredictable or risky conditions, and when you have to be more maneuverable and more agile, more adaptive? So I can share this as well. Any other questions? And this is, like I said, yeah.
So this is Aaron.
Aaron.
Hi. I have a question around sort of value stream mapping analysis work, you know, to kind of confront the, you know, velocity paradox, right? Where everybody tries to make, you know, 12-second CI/CD gets, while, you know, there's core processes that are days, weeks, months long that don't get touched. And, you know, this sort of, it's almost like an imbalance in thinking behind it, you know, because it's very tech led versus very sort of business operations led. I'm just wondering kind of where, if that sits anywhere in the ecosystem.
So, Aaron, the good thing is this, so this ecosystem, the system modeling technique or tool, whichever you prefer, does not have to be, so you can apply it pretty much for anything, for value stream mapping, for you know, story mapping, any organization, anything that requires thinking and brainstorming, you could use this for. You may potentially have a system variable as emphasis on velocity. And another variable would be value, it's a double, importance of value stream mapping or benefits of value stream mapping. And if you see how you can untangle this and see what it may lead to, like for instance, just shooting from the hip, right? Benefits of value stream mapping, ability to see how value flows through the system in a customer-centric, product-centric way. You can probably also align this with quality of product ownership and ability of product owners and users and stakeholders to have direct communication with teams, teams' behaviors, what motivates individuals, what incentivizes them to give honest feedback to product people. And of course, you can map it to velocity. So if you have, there's a whole other array of variables where a line manager is, you know, standing over component-centric team, which is, by the way, not even a feature team, and is asking more. Can we have more velocity? Can we have more output? Will this team be willing to experiment and improvise, or will it be just, you know, executing and focus on output? So you can definitely apply this. This is, I wouldn't say, this probably sits above and beyond any specific what's a discipline or teaching, like with your, yeah, it's the way to see the whole. That it's the universe, right? It's not on.
Now, how have you found, sorry for follow-up, but
Yeah.
how have you found introducing this, especially in sort of, you know, let's say sub C-suite, which is sort of what I found is kind of the sweet spot a lot of times, you know, the sort of very senior VPs or SVPs, you know, right in that range, because the good ones tend to have a lot of hands-on experience over 20, 30 years.
Mhm.
How have you found sort of introducing this so it's repeatable? Because that's the challenge, right? Is that this involves sort of a workshop centric, it's custom and tailored, whereas a lot of the processes that happen in line of business and corporate tend to have these sort of repeatable financial instruments around them, cars and you know, the business cases and the sort of EVA, you know, all the legacy financial proof points, right? That would be the way I would put it. And so this sort of competes against that. And I've struggled with the value and flow and outcomes just alone, right? OKRs, you know, which I'm not saying those are easy, but they're not insanely difficult. You wind up getting some challenges because people don't know how to interpret those back into MPV, IRR, blah, 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 you know, into the sort of, let's call it 1990s and 2000s financial thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what have you done? I mean, have you done workshops, or, I mean, like, what's the way that you've sort of broken through?
So if my understanding is correct, Aaron, so the question is applicability of this approach in general, like when and how and with whom, right?
Yeah.
We're speaking, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? So
Yeah.
a couple of things. So first, as I mentioned, you can do it on your own just to prepare yourself for a tough conversation. I mean, you can just explore it on your own at your own pace. Not ideal because you're going to be anchored and biased towards your own beliefs and ways of thinking. You can also do it with your colleagues, with your peers, people that are similar in expertise and mindset, just like you, and maybe you together can brainstorm this. Like create a nice hypo around some of your speculations and suspicions, right, and your expectations. You can also have it with people that are not your colleagues, not your peers, they're your coachees or your mentees, and you can do this as well. This is more going to be, you're going to be more of a probably enabler and facilitator. Ideally, you want to understand their subject matter, but not necessarily, because they catch on. If they catch on to the technique, they can take it to the pretty high level, right? But also, and not uncommon that you can actually take this to more senior folks, to this senior echelon, senior suite. Now, clearly, you will have less opportunity to engage them in a lengthy brainstorming conversation unless they are really, really, really open-minded and willing to go the mile. So maybe in this case, practically speaking, you want to map the system, create some sort of a hypo and bring it to their attention. Probably you want to make it, balance between being simple and being obvious, right? And engage them that way and kind of put it in front of them. A picture is 1,000 words. Your bet is here on what? Once they see it, it would be hard for them to unsee. And you can ask some open-ended questions such as, what would you do to fix the problem? Because this whole thing is meant to be like, excuse me, like a huge dashboard of your spaceship. You got 1,000 different bulbs and different gadgets. And by turning things up or down, you can amplify or reduce impact downstream. So you don't necessarily need to, like a domino effect, you don't need to move a truck. Maybe you need to hit a domino 3 miles away, and it's going to have like an amplifying effect and bigger dominoes and bigger blocks, and then, cement bricks and cinder blocks. And the last one is going to fall on your truck and it's going to move. So you can approach it from that perspective. Yeah, I mean, and when and where? Retrospectives, workshops, brainstorming sessions, you name it. I mean, I'd rather see people coming together and doing this as opposed to exchanging heavy documentation and wiki pages and box notes that it turns out to be just another example of local optimization and waste.
I mean, a lot of the challenge is breaking those habits, because I assume most of the people here have those experiences, is, you're presenting this medium on a consistent, it's decks, spreadsheets embedded, or the spreadsheet attached. It's weird kind of almost, I call it lecture corporate. I mean, it's sort of like this weird version of grad school in the corporate world again. To break those habits, I found is really challenging, because those habits just sort of perpetuate up and down, right? And so you're sort of this oddball that, not you, but me in this case, throwing in these mind maps or these other tools to try to get them to sort of dislodge from that traditional model that they have.
Yeah, I look, so you have a point. I mean, I can't disagree with you. I think you're right, in your suspicion that this may not always be an easy thing. In fact, there was in my experience also, so you should be expecting this too, there could be a certain degree of frustration when you present it to people, because it's like, so yeah, you helped me discover the problem. So what are you going to do about it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Why
it's like,
am I supposed to? So
yeah,
exactly. I created a painful visibility for you, and it's clear. So maybe there was something I can do. So now let's map it out. Is it something I can do as a coach, or, and I'm speaking about myself, as a coach and org design consultant that is not a part of your org structure? Or maybe there's something you can do. Or is there something I can do for you specifically so it empowers you to do the rest? Maybe you need to get some basic education, some basic knowledge, some basic training. Who knows?
Yeah, my idea, and tell me if this is crazy, is take a pile of known wins that people accept are good wins, and whatever they are, and if you can, reverse engineer some back into this model and maybe finish it out if it's not completed, and then be able to show those as sort of proof of values, or, you know, kind of your MVPs or MVVs almost.
So reverse engineering is something I do a lot. So you can reverse engineer a complete disaster into a root cause,
Yeah.
or you can reverse engineer you know, phenomenal success also to how it all started, right? And maybe you can find some of the crossroads where some very critical decisions that were made that led to success and disaster. And maybe you can introduce and interfere at that juncture, right? We always have, as coaches, we always have to assume a positive intent, right? But just because people have good positive intent does not mean it will translate into positive results. So this, if nothing else, this is a good way to ask powerful questions and make people, you know, come to their own solutions. Once they own it, once they see it, it's going to be pretty challenging to unsee it. You may get this, you know, almost like a knee-jerk reaction, like almost like a frisky. Oh, so you're showing all of this to me. So what are you doing about this? Well, Mr. CTO, look at that. This specific variable is fully controlled by you or by your HR business partner, who is maybe also locally optimized, because if they stop spending thousands of hours on individual performance, they have nothing to do. That becomes a bigger systemic problem. You have locally optimized for this function that leads to dysfunction downstream.
Do you usually use these as kind of one-offs and as a kind of reasoning or thinking tool, or do you keep them for reference as well?
I'm sorry, do I keep this for, is this just one?
In general, so you create one or you co-create one with some coaching clients. Would this be, you know, up on the wall somewhere, or is it a throwaway thing? You know.
So, yeah, so first of all, you know, I don't want to anchor you to any specific dynamics where I've done it when I've seen it, because of course I do. So when I run my workshops, training, I heavily use it. Of course, if you're in the same room, when we're back, hopefully soon, back to normal or semi-normal, you know, your typical room where a system modeling takes place looks like, I'll make a mental note to share some images with you. It's the entire wall, entire perimeter is covered with white canvas, like special paper we use, or just whiteboards when you model your system. I mean, we also play games. Tons of energizers we could use, energizing videos. But ultimately, what we want to come out with is with better understanding of the system. And this does require people designing it together, you know, as groups, as individuals. So I would expect this to be, some of these could be reused and referred back to. But like say, if I were to go to a different organization or to a different team, I may want to recreate it de novo so that people actually see that this isn't a copy-paste thing. This is something they discovered on their own. Now, of course, the more you do it, the more, you know, the more obvious it becomes. They start throwing these variables on the wall. Oh, don't forget that one. But
so you can come back to it in future sessions with some new insight, plug that in, and then see how that affects all the other variables.
In fact, what you could do, like here's an example. If we were to do another session, just hypothetically on this, I would just take this thing alone, this variable alone, and I would blow it out. Oh, let me actually show you what it may look like. Hang on one second. You know what, just give me 1 second. I have it on this canvas somewhere. Oh, I also have it on my slide so I can point you to it. Specifically on an HR element, we can expand and explore just like so. Just HR alone. We're not even talking about anything else. Right? So this is just one of the examples. You take one system variable or something that's related to the subject, to the topic, and you just blow it up. So you are within the ecosystem still, right? But you are where things are very, very specific. I mean, it's almost like you're in the galaxy, but you just went to the solar system.
Yeah. I see. Different levels of zoom. Yeah.
It's a different level of magnitude, different level of zooming.
Gene, I have a question. My question is in regards to in the previous diagram that you wrote, you were writing a lot of these variables like likelihood of this happening, likely. Is just like we write a user story, is there a way to document a variable from, let's say, affinity diagram initially you do with everybody in the room, and then you extract the variables out of it? Is there a way or a framework around that as well?
So I think the question is there a proper syntax to write a variable, right? Like, as a user, I want blah, 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 so that. Do you need to have all three clauses? Yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, if you leave so that out, then at one point, a layman person like me is not going to know why you write in the story. You want to so that clause. By the same token, you want to stick to a very rudimentary, very basic, very fundamental syntax, specifically by neutralizing your variable. So your variable should be a neutral thing that you can act upon. So words such as likelihood, probability, chance of would be a good way to go, because once you make a variable into, so once you adjectivize it, I don't think there's a word, once you turn it into an adjective like high degree of, then you're already implying that it's high.
Yeah.
You want to leave it at the in the form that allows you to amplify and reduce it. So if you, instead of having high degree of cohesiveness, you may just say degree of cohesiveness, and something like general trust among people. You don't want to say high degree of trust because otherwise you're going to be hard coding it.
Right.
Right.
It's
so
the purpose of the model is to drive meaningful conversations. So
right.
Yeah. Okay.
We want to have a conversation around this. So you want to have as much fluidity and dynamicity in the system so that you can turn it up and down. I mean, something is the turn upward, upstream will have an impact downstream, a high, low, delayed, or immediate. By the way, speaking of annotations, this is so minor. I can share some reference with you. Minus could be an opposite, and like you saw previously, quick fix is what you have. This would be similar to what's called a constraint. So you can actually call this a constraint because, or constraint or amplification. If something, actually, I'm not going to put anything there because if it was the opposite effect, I could call it a C, which stands for constraint. But this case, it's not, because it's actual amplification.
Yeah, thank you so much for the webinar today and for great explanation. Yeah,
of course. Folks, this is it. I mean, there's just really not, a prescriptive methodology or must-have tool. It's just something that I thought would be useful because, and I guess I'm slightly anchored. And I do some work with people that are aspirants, become better coaches. I always want people to have balance between a great coaching stance. There's a difference between coaching and consulting or coaching and training. So that's definitely there. But also I want people to be coaching towards goodness, right? I mean, sounds a bit of a cliche, right? So one of the mottos of, I think the Scrum Alliance says it, we want to improve the world of work. So by coaching, hopefully we can improve the world of work, how people work, how companies work. So going back to my analogy of a therapist or therapy, we want to make sure we prevent some things that maybe not so great. So for example, if you see that they're clearly not good decisions, explicitly not good decisions, and they may not be because of bad intentions, just because of clearly misunderstanding, or people just don't see things, not enough education, gross misunderstanding. This is where you have to interfere perhaps and say, look, this is what I've seen elsewhere in the past, and this is something that you may want to avoid. All right. Any questions? Any thoughts? I'll share the needed. I saw some of the pings in the chat room. I didn't read them, but I will export when I stop recording. I'm going to have a script, and I'll try to maybe answer some of these questions in addition. Maybe I'll share it wider.
That's great. Thank you very much, Dean.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, thank you, folks. Thank you for joining. Hopefully it was useful, and all the best to everyone. Okay?
Hey, Gene, a quick question.
Yes, Aaron.
I'm wondering in future ones if you want us to maybe bring examples, or obviously we'll cleanse them to protect the guilty, but we could bring some examples that we can that, or you can maybe guide us through, or we can sort of dummy our way up there or whatever. If that's something that you're interested in, I'm more than willing.
Sure. This may not be a bad idea. Let me think about it. And well, the short answer is I think it's a good idea. Yeah. So maybe we can have like a follow-up session where people come with specific handful of system variables and system optimizing goals, and we can brainstorm it together. Maybe I can think of a way to actually use
maybe we could do some kind of, I've done some things which are almost like 2-minute retros, right? Like a standard, very, one-page template almost. And, you identify what it is and you sort of look at the block.
System variables there.
Yep. I think it's not a bad idea. I think it's a good idea indeed. And let's, you can drop me a note offline and maybe we can coordinate. And this is just we can make it into like a meetup event. In fact, that would be not a bad thing to do. Maybe have like a meetup with practical application of system modeling. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you everyone again. Enjoy the long weekend if you're in the States. I think Monday's off, and if not, just have a great weekend. Okay?
Yep. Everyone be safe.
Same to you guys.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Later. Cheers.
Yep. Cheers. I put my email and number in there for you in the.
Excellent. I'll export it. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Great. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was great. Yep. Be safe.